September 7th minutes. If no changes need to be made, I'll accept the motion.
Make a motion to accept the minutes as written.
I have a motion to have a second.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda are the, under old and new business, election of the officers. Any discussion with that? If not, I'll accept a motion.
And I do want to say, Rebecca kind of last minute did not come, and she didn't want to infer, but did just say if we kept the same, she didn't have problems nominating Lee as chair, or if anyone chose to nominate her as vice chair, she would be happy to serve. But of course, she's not here, so didn't want to interject too much of that.
Correct. Yeah, she had something that came up just last minute that she could not get around, that not of the pleasant type either.
Right.
So remember her in your prayers tonight. Anyway, I'm happy for anybody else to serve as president if they would like to nominate themselves.
I nominate Lee Turner
How about for
chairman.
for chairman? What about vice chair?
Rebecca Bryant.
And our secretary.
Cindy is an excellent option. Cindy Beaker.
Okay, good.
Excellent option.
You do a lot better job than Hunter did a few weeks, but that's not saying a lot. In that case, I've got a motion and a second. Any further? All in favor for the slate of officers as is, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. We have the approval of the meetings for 2024. Is that in our, oh, never mind, it is in a handout. It was stuck to my page with a half of a staple. Any questions on that? All of our meetings are on Mondays with the exception of
Labor Day,
Labor Day and
New Year.
New Year's.
Labor Day, New Year's, and December. Okay.
That's the only, those are the only two.
That's only two.
Yeah, I think so.
Holidays that we could pull up if there's anything,
All right.
parades or anything.
Except I question Monday, April 1st.
That would be good. All right, well, if no changes need to be made, I'll accept a motion to approve the hour deadlines and our meeting schedule.
I move we accept the 2024 Planning Commission schedule as shown.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right, if there's no more old or new business, Hunter, we'll move on to SD 2142, Harvest Green, East Phase, and we have 1, 2, and then West 1 and 2. Will we take these together, or are we going to do them? I know we'll have to vote individually.
I think the conversation can happen at once. Michael did a good job summarizing, but as of yet, we do not have a consent agenda. So maybe something we talk about within the next year for
Okay.
these type cases.
Sure.
So the first four items are Harvest Green, 4 different phases. We have East and West, phases 1 and 2. Currently, Harvest Green, East and West phase 1 are the construction that you currently see as you drive down Highway 181 on the north side. Staff doesn't really have a whole lot of comments other than in phase 1 east, there is a connection to what is now an existing going-to-be road to the south, Rockwell Place, and we just kind of want to confirm that Harvest Green East Phase 1 does connect with that existing wood road, Bushel Drive, to that south property line. The aerial photos kind of on the screen right here were taken at the end of August, so it appears that things are being constructed, going to connect. Hunter actually drove out to the site visit today, and they are still moving forward. It looks like their intent is to pave that. We only bring this up as in the preliminary plat. That was a buffer that was there for future connectivity in the future. With that buffer now gone, that connectivity here in the present, we just want to solidify that that connection point will be made at time of final plat approval when they do come request that. The other phases, we have no objections and support the extensions.
We don't have that in our packets today.
We don't have any copies of that.
I don't believe the letter made it to the packet. This is
That's
a,
about the letter. We don't have anything on that in our packet.
We typically don't on extensions.
Okay.
We don't put anything in the packet there. It's usually just a request.
Okay.
And then we report in the meeting whether it's been sitting idle or under work.
Okay.
We did have this one thing just to memorialize and discuss that haven't heard any opposition.
And this is not a public hearing.
correct. This is not a public hearing. And looking at the letter that they did submit, I have it on the screen. The preliminary plat is set to expire on November 1st of 2023. That's why the extension request is before you
Okay.
today. And they anticipate to conclude Phase 1, east and west both, at the end of the year. And then Phase 2, Harvest Green East and West, to begin construction next month.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions, I don't know.
And we have Aaron Collins with SC Civil is with us this evening that can answer questions on behalf of the developer.
I just have a couple of questions. I was out there this afternoon, driving through there. Can you remind me how many units we're looking to have ingress and egress out of there with the Publix driveway exactly across the street? There is no turning lanes.
So the one development that is
aren't
out there that is directly across from the public entrance is Rockwell. That is not this development. This development will
Okay.
have an entrance directly across from the water subdivision and another entrance off of Highway 81 to the north side.
Because you can't get into that development right now as you drive. But unless you go, and then when you talk about the road that you're talking about, it's like the road that is a dirt road that's right adjacent to 181.
No, this is an internal road of Harvest Green that would connect to the already paved and asphalted Bushel Drive inside the Rockwell development on the south that actually will end up terminating at the Publix entrance.
When you say there's a buffer, because we don't have anything to go by. then-
already approved that.
Right, I'm just, I do have questions about where the traffic is going to go, what's going to, if we're extending this for another year, what is the traffic going to look like in a year? Does that give us a new traffic study? Does that prompt something like that?
The preliminary approval, Good.
Just to remind, there was 3 projects, all using Bushel Drive. And this was the one, there is a traffic study requiring a signal north of here on the entrance, but this is a shared drive.
North would be the development
This
of
is across from
Green.
the waters.
Okay.
Approximately. This one is,
south of here.
there's one at the entrance to, the one you're talking about coming out across from Publix,
Right,
does have a traffic study, and it's looking at future growth. Of course, the encounter development we looked at, and other things may trigger that, but that's something we can look at in the future.
okay, so there, when we give an extension, we are going to take that into consideration, or?
That does not have an impact on this project. This extension is handling the traffic signal at the intersection of the Waters
The Waters
and
intersection.
181. The developer to the south, in partnership with the one on the corner, is handling that next intersection. So the improvements are already being done at the intersection here on this phase.
We typically give one extension kind of carte
For a year.
blanche, and we've never,
I just
you know,
know a
questions
year
that.
now is a lot
Right,
different than
but
a
to have
year
them
used to be.
redevelop, they'd have to pull up everything they've got in there, you know, and start over again, and we've never required anybody to do that. We've always given one kind of carte blanche.
And it's a good question, but the improvements that would need to be done, if a traffic study did warrant something, they're already guaranteed.
Yeah.
Got it.
All right. Did anybody in the public come for this item? It's not a public hearing, but I'll let somebody speak if they'd like to. And does the engineer have anything to add to this at this time, or anybody have any questions for the engineer at this time? In that case, I'll accept a motion we'll just do them one at a time. For the first floor, SD 2142, Harvest Green East, Phase 1.
I make a motion to approve the request for extension for SD 21 21.42 for Harvest Green East Phase 1.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Do I have a motion for SD 2143?
I'll make a motion for SD 21.43 Harvest Green East Phase 2. Extension for 1 year preliminary plat.
Do I have a second? All, any further? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Next item on the agenda, 2144.
I move we grant a 1-year extension for preliminary plat approval for SD 21.44.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. And then 2145.
I move we grant an extension of 1 year for preliminary plat approval for SD 21.45.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That brings us to 2148.
SD 2148, Planters Point. You'll see I have the letter on the screen. It references a different subdivision case, and it also represents an MOP case. This is the corner of 104 and 181, the Planters Point Shopping Center that will contain the public site. The case number is 21.48. We've had simultaneous multiple cases, 2-lot subdivision, multiple occupancy project. The property annexed into the city came back for a multiple occupancy project on this case with the subdivision. And this is for the subdivision itself to cover what is in the multiple occupancy project as well. And they're requesting a 1-year time extension for the current MOP and subdivision plat. This would expire, I believe, coming at the November as well. And I do not believe that anybody is here on behalf of that developer this evening.
And this is the first extension we've done on this one.
That's correct.
Okay.
And I did check this one out today, there was work being done. You can't, just to the south of that site, there was work being done on the turn lanes and work on 104.
Are they connecting to the north on this?
The road to the north you see going into the top right corner is connecting to 181. And basically at the edge of the parking lot forward, it is a public road. So the acreage to the north of this, in the minor plat we saw, is connected to a public road. It does have connection.
So because the reason I remember we kind of fought pretty hard to make sure that there's a connection to the north, and I don't see it on here.
That empty lot does not have any development, so to the north, you do have a public road that, if anything develops there, it can be connected.
Okay, perfect. All right, anybody in the audience have anything to say about this item? If not, commissioners, do you have any questions for staff? If not, I'll accept a motion.
I move we approve a 1-year preliminary plat approval extension for Planters Point, SD 21.48.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right, next item on the agenda, UR 2313, a 115211 review for C-Spire.
And my name's Mike Jeffries, City of Fairhope, just so everybody's aware. This is UR 23.13. It's C-Spired 115211 for the installation of approximately 5,688 feet of buried fiber along the routes located as shown on the map. This comes from Fairhope Avenue running along Northwood Street. Staff recommend, there's nothing different or odd about this utility review, so we have our standard comments below, and staff recommends approval of UR 23.13, subject to the following 10 conditions listed below.
Is there anybody here on behalf of C-Spire? All right. Commissioners, any questions for staff? If not, I'll entertain a
I
motion.
just want to make sure that we include the conditions, and I'm not certain, did I not see staff conditions on those first 4 requests for extensions? Did I not see a staff condition? And that didn't make it into the motion, but y'all are lucky, because I can't speak very well tonight, or I would have
We
spoken
didn't
up.
have these.
There were no we didn't have anything that had,
We didn't have
we had
these
no
in our
papers
packet.
on the first floor.
I bet if you go back to the slide, I could have swore there was a condition there.
Technically, on that one phase of the connection of the road, that was.
It was,
that was a
this
condition.
recommendation was the condition of that, our recommendation was conditioned upon the connectivity, the connection of the road of Bushel Drive in Phase 1, Harvest Green East, to the existing road that has been constructed. That is a.
Was that not in the original plan?
It was not, the connectivity, if it was ever connected, is, so just a little gray area. I don't think we need to make that a condition of approval, because they're coming back for final plat. We verbalized it, everybody's in agreement, there's no opposition from anybody.
Does,
Nothing left, I believe.
does Chris, do you feel comfortable with that?
Well, you went out and inspected it, inspected it, and it
There
shows
is
the
some work
physical
being done. You can see
connection
it,
of the
yeah.
road.
There's some storage containers kind of blocking my way, but you can see a little bit of sidewalks are already connected. And I think we've been talking for 2 weeks. And
Yes,
there's
and
no
they're-
opposition to
No.
that. If you'd like, anyone would like to amend the motion?
I would go back and, just to be clear, amend the decision, because, you know, if that is a condition that you're expecting that was part of the granting of the extension, that needs to be clear for the record.
And that
So-
was on,
So if I could get a motion to rectify the condition of approval for SD 21.42 Harvest Green East Phase 1 extension request to include the conditions presented by
somebody could just
staff.
make a motion, subject to staff recommendations.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the one-year extension for SD 21.42 Harvest Green East Phase 1 to include and conditional upon staff recommendations.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously, and we probably should, if we're going to put stipulations on there, at least on those, have, you know, something. And moving on, UR 2313, whoever makes a motion, I do like when it says, subject to staff recommendations. Yes.
I move we approve UR 23.13, subject to staff recommendations.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, motion passes unanimously. SD 2325, Moffitt's Way.
They want me to recuse myself.
Thank y'all for clarifying that.
Yes, sir, thanks for bringing it to our attention.
I would have brought it up earlier if I could talk.
So this is, the owner is Ms. Deborah Moffett. Seth Moore with Moore Surveying is the authorized agent for the project. This is a 3-lot minor subdivision, approximately 2.58 acres, located at 6125 Nelson Drive. Property is zoned R1. There is an existing residence on the proposed Lot 1, which the proposed lot does not cause any nonconformities with the structures that are existing. On the screen, you can see on the left is our zoning map. Like I said, it's just on the east side of Scenic Highway 98. On the screen is the plat. The 3 lots run north to south, all located on Nelson Road. All lots are within 450 feet of the fire hydrant, meet the minimum lot requirements. The proposed subdivision is not including any infrastructure or improvements, therefore a lot of the tree protection landscaping criteria is not needed. Existing flow patterns for drainage are not being changed. City of Fairhope services water, sewer, gas, and electric. I do want to note that due to the water conservation, at the time of this application, the water department had suspended fire flow testing, and you see as a condition of approval that the flow modeling shall be done and approved prior to the signing of the final plat. And with that, we do have 2 recommendations of approval, and I'll explain that when we get to that slide. The sidewalks, they are provided a 15 sidewalk easement in lieu of constructing the sidewalks at this time. And with the fire flow having to be done, if for some reason there would have to be improvements that were done, that would convert this from a minor to a major due to the water main extension or whatever they may be required from the water department. So we have a two-part recommendation. As you know, minor subdivisions are usually a simultaneous preliminary and final approval. A lot of times that's not explained, but that is what we are doing. So our first recommendation is to approve the preliminary plat of SD 23.25 Moffitt's Way minor subdivision. And recommendation number 2 falls in line, recommend final plat approval of 23.25, conditioned on that fire flow model is completed and approved. And I'd be happy to answer any questions on behalf of staff. And we have the applicant and Mr. Seth Moore, the surveyor of record, with us tonight that can answer questions on their behalf.
Are there any questions for staff at this time?
If nothing's planned to be built on the lots other than what's already there.
Correct.
This fire flow modeling, if a building permit is applied for, will that be required?
So
The-
the condition of the subdivision regulations is we have a fire hydrant operating. We confirm the flow. There could potentially, maybe not likely, be public infrastructure improvements to get the flow to that if it's not operating correctly right now. So building will also come in and check, depending on what's being built. It is residential, but say down in the future, somebody got this rezoned and wanted to do something else, then the building department's going to look at the fire code for the specific building being built. It might have additional requirements.
And this is within the city limits?
Yes, sir, that is correct. Property is zoned R1, single-family residential.
All right, if there are no more questions for staff, Seth, do you have anything to add at this time?
The only thing I really have to add, of course, my name is Seth Moore, with Moore Surveying, is that Ms. Moffitt talked to the water department today, and they are scheduling that for Thursday. There again, it should not be a problem, but just in case, we understand the two-part approval on this.
Okay. Any questions for Seth at this time? All right, thank you, Seth. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Does anybody wish to speak to Moffitt's Way? This is on the north side of Nelson Road, just probably about, how far would that be off 98, David? You should know about 100, about 100 yards, 100 feet.
It's about 300 feet, I think, about 100 yards.
All right, about 100 yards. There's not a 500, there's not a request, they're requesting to not put sidewalks there since there aren't any sidewalks at this time. And instead would just like to do the 15-foot, and staff's okay with the 15-foot easement in lieu of sidewalks there. There are no plans for anything else around that area.
That is correct.
All right. In that case, nobody from the public wishes to speak to this item? In case, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time and turn the meeting back over to the commissioners.
I move we approve, this says final plat. Oh. I move we approve preliminary plat, SD 23.25 Moffitt's Way minor subdivision, subject to staff recommendations and recommendation 2.
Can we do both of these in one?
No, please vote separately.
Please vote separately.
Okay.
So no conditions on one
Okay,
is our
no conditions on
recommendation.
one.
So you approve, you make a motion to.
I move we approve preliminary plat approval of SD 23.25 Moffitt's Way.
All right, I have a motion to approve the preliminary plat for Moffitt's Way. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right, on the final plat,
I move we approve, give final plat approval to SD 23.25 Moffitt's Way with the staff's recommendation of a fire flow model being completed and approved.
do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor, any further? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to excuse myself for the next two cases.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, you ready to introduce it for me?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, that's just, SD 2326, Vadena mixed-use development at the intersection of Magnolia and Church Street.
Okay, thank you. Before I get started on this one, this is an MOP case. You might be familiar with the site. There is the next case is a corresponding site plan review. So a lot of times when we see them, there's not a lot of difference. I'll kind of go through both and present them at once for the sake of timing in our non-air conditioned space. But we do have some minor differences between the two that I'll try to point out. But of course, if you have any questions or if any come up during the public hearing, I'd be happy to answer those. This is two public hearings, so I do think you'll need to open one public hearing. Sorry, site plan is not a public hearing, and this body is making a recommendation to the city council on the second case, the SR 2305. So with that said, this is an application for a 9-unit MOP project. It is located within the CBD. There are 7 residential units and 2 commercial units. Mixed use is something we've discussed and even amended, especially when we talk about a mixed-use building. If you recall, we made an amendment to the zoning ordinance that required 50% of the ground floor to be commercial space, and that was a minimum. This project is a little bit different than that, and it will be condominiumized lots, which are, you don't see a condominium plat because that's exempt in the CBD, but it is all one owner, common ownership to maintain the common area. It spreads out mixed use a little bit. So we actually took this as a project for the use that was a little unclear. It does say 50% commercial space. So we actually took this to the Board of Adjustment for review on the use. And what was proposed is each building is a separate condoed lot, but sharing, and we do appreciate the benefit that the shared common ownership, as you'll see, there's some saved trees and landscape and a little green space that we typically don't get in the CBD. But this use, mixed use, ultimately results in 5 residential units, 2 mixed-use buildings. The mixed-use buildings do meet the zoning ordinance requirements of ground floor commercial space. This is on the northeast corner of Magnolia and Church Street. We have, this body, the Board of Adjustment and the City Council has approved plans on this site before. From an MOP perspective, that was 10 units. It was 7 residential, 3 commercial. The buildings actually filled up more of the lot. If you'll recall, we had some driveways exiting, or garage doors exiting onto Church Street. Quite a few more of the trees were removed. But this project purported to save as many of the trees on site as possible, and internalize the drive aisle so we didn't see the driveways, and create a little bit of a buffer area around those trees and really work with the limbs. And we appreciate that process. It's been a cooperative review process, and each iteration, I think, improved the project. What you're seeing here is some illustrations that, while we're in the MOP, it would be something we'd look at as a site plan review, really what it looks like. So what you're seeing here are the 2 buildings facing Magnolia, the commercial on the downstairs, and then it would be a single unit. The second and third floor would be single unit, single ownership. You're seeing basically 2 of those buildings.
We also discussed, and this board, or this commission certainly knows when we talk about building height and average natural elevation. I want to make sure everyone is on board with this. We talked about it in Board of Adjustment. If you measure the complete slope of this property, some streets are going to have really tall buildings, some are going to have really short. So what we've proposed here is to use each building site and use the average natural elevation of those. You'll see an elevation here provided by the architect, how that kind of steps down with the property and really works with the land. This is the site plan layout. You'll see the corner on Church. This is a area for the residents. It's open. This is the area you'll see in future photos where there are really nice oak trees on this property. There are also some in the right-of-way along Church Street, making every attempt to save those. The buildings front the roads, but the garages and the rear access and kind of back of house items are situated to the rear. That really provides us a good street frontage for these projects. Utilities are approved. There's no infrastructure that the city will be accepting on this. It's just taps and meters and things like that. The electric and gas meters will be located behind the building, so we want to see some of that installed before vertical construction begins. But I will talk about that in just a moment. Drainage has been approved by the city. The landscape plan we received meets all requirements and even goes a little bit above and beyond when it comes to the tree preservation. Your landscape plan is on the screen in front of you. If we have any questions, utility plan. And I do want to kind of talk about one thing, and I guess this would be the best plan, maybe this one. So sidewalks are required in the CBD. They're required to be 8 foot wide in the CBD. With permission, they can go to the city council can approve 6 feet wide sidewalks. There are a few areas on this site where your staff is actually saying that 6 feet doesn't work in some areas. There's some critical root zones, namely the existing sidewalk of the work that was just done along Church Street, but namely this existing sidewalk here, and then maybe a few other places as we work through with these trees. So our goal on this project is to maintain the 8 foot sidewalk where designed and we're shown on the screen. Narrow that down to 6 foot is allowed, and if the council approves. But where we have those critical root zones, allow the staff to work with them during construction to make sure we're doing all we can to not damage the root system of those trees and still maintain an ADA accessible sidewalk. That's going to be some work that needs to be done in the field. It doesn't meet the technical dimensions of that, but that's your staff and Public Works and right-of-way and all the work that's been done on Church Street is what's pushing that, not necessarily the applicant.
I think the sidewalk on the other side of the street there is currently 5 feet, isn't it?
Yeah, they're much narrower. It's just our current regulations require
I
that
mean,
6 foot.
if it wouldn't have to be a Board of Adjustments, I wouldn't mind if, allowing it to go to 5 in a few of those places, because those are some really nice oak trees there that, really have a lot to do with the character of that area. And that's not, it is Central Business District, but it's not like the intersection of Church Street and Fairhope Avenue or Fairhope Avenue and Section Street.
Right. And kind of the way we looked at this, and we could send back to Board of Adjustment if we saw the site plan, but the way we looked at this, we kind of have two conflicting regulations. There's a tree preservation and goals of the tree ordinance that wants to save every tree we have. I think this kind of, when we have two regulations that conflict, I think there's an exception here, as long as we're meeting the goals of that 6 foot sidewalk, 8 foot when we can. And then just around those root zones, and we're not talking about a 3 foot sidewalk all the way down Church Street. We're talking about where we hit those sidewalks that might require a tree well or something, so it narrows down to, maybe it's 5 feet, maybe it's 4.5, but we're meeting ADA, and maybe that's only for a 8 foot length. So it'll be natural. And it kind of, the logic is the same when you're putting in tree wells within an 8-foot sidewalk. That's kind of what we're doing as the end result. So the sidewalk will still be 6 foot or 8 foot, but there might be some unique sized tree wells.
Yeah, when we allow people to put posts and chairs and tables and rocking chairs and everything on the sidewalk, so, in places with a lot more traffic than this.
All right, the standard use table and land uses is on the plan. This is in the CBD. The green space requirements are more lenient. Everything is acceptable. The buildings where they are all pushed to the front property line. Obviously, no wetlands. This is in compliance with our comprehensive plan. In the MOP, I do want to mention this, and this is something that I've been back and looked at the MOP procedures when they started, or when we amended in creating a final. And it was a lot of discussion, if I know a few of you were here. And we've tried to be as generous, and I'm glad Eric's here, because we've got some multiple occupancy projects that we've been lenient. Go ahead and get started with vertical construction, but you have to close those out. Close your final MOP before you get CO. Unfortunately, a lot of those get out there under construction, and while their focus should be the infrastructure, the land the land disturbance things, it kind of, everybody gets started, how fast can we move? They focus on the building, and then we get put in a position where we're withholding COs until they get in front of planning commission. There's really long delays. This does meet, under our current regulations, it does meet the threshold where it has to have final plat approval through the planning commission. And what we'd like to see is any of that land disturbance work is done. The utilities are, it might not take long, but it comes back for final before we begin vertical construction on the buildings. And with that said, we do have a few other conditions of approval. The developer shall coordinate the installation of sidewalks with the Public Works Department to minimize disturbance to the existing trees in the right-of-way at the time of building permit. Any aid to construction costs shall be paid prior to issuance of a building permit. A fire flow model is completed and approved. That should be done, same condition we talked about last time, under the water conservation, and our water department was not running those fire models. Yeah, so we do not have to worry about that extra approval. And provide spot elevations for the building corners of the pads so we can determine how to measure building elevations prior to any land disturbance or issuance of any building permit to confirm building height. And fifth, you'll notice on the site plan here, these kind of curvilinear items, and I think we'll see a elevation in the site plan. Those are elevated kind of metal stairs that come from the front door of the buildings and are bridged almost across the root zones of those trees. They are in the right-of-way. We do have some utilities in that, not major ones, but we do have gas is certainly there. Worst case, there's entrance and exits to this house, but without all of these buildings, without those. Worst case scenario, we can remove the metal stairs. Our utilities can do the work. They can be bolted back, but we do want to see a hold
I
harmless.
thought everything was in the middle of the road there. It was torn up for last year and a half. Y'all should know where the utilities are.
We know where the utilities are. It
They
took a
don't know
while
where
to
they are
get
there.
Yeah.
They don't know where they are anywhere.
We
Good
did not
Lord.
know before that work where all the utilities were, but now we do. There was 120 years of utilities under there. This is for preliminary approval, and a final plat approval will be required prior to vertical construction. It might be easier to answer any questions on this one since it's a separate case and vote on this one. The next one is similar, but I think it'd be cleaner
Let's do
to
that.
just do this one.
All right, any questions for staff at this time?
The parking for the commercial space is not required?
So good question. And before we kind of hit that a little bit in the site plan review, but I will show you, the requirement in the CBD is 1 parking space per residential unit. So seven spaces would be required. There are more than 7 spaces provided within this project, and we'll look at I think we have a parking plan, but they're all rear loaded, there are garages. You can see some of those in the elevations.
All right, I was mentioning the commercial space.
Commercial space does not require
Okay.
parking spaces in the CBD.
Okay, gotcha.
Each of these units do have some parking. I'll let the applicant kind of discuss what their ideal game plan or goal would be, but as we're approving this, they could be an individual commercial unit that does not have on-site parking.
Okay.
Any further questions? All right, in that case, thank you, Hunter. David, I don't see anybody for, you for SEC still? Okay, come on up then, thank you, I'm sorry. I was looking for Larry out there.
She sent me today.
Found out there wasn't any air conditioning that made you come, I guess.
I'm David Lavery with SE Civil, and I'm the engineer for the project, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, any questions for the engineer for SE Civil while he's here? If not, if you'll just stay up front, because I'm going to open the public hearing, and if the public has any questions, I won't answer them. I'll call you back up and
Okay.
let you answer those after the public hearing is closed.
All right.
So thank you. All right, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Yes, sir. And just for our record, even though I know who you are, you need to state your name and your address so we can put you
I'm
down
Al
in our
Johnson.
meeting
I live at
record.
215 Magnolia. And I'm directly across the street on the corner from this project. And I wonder what Mr. Ike would do. He'd turn it around and upside down, wouldn't he?
I don't know. If he got the money for it, he'd probably be turning upside down dancing.
Several questions, though. A gentleman told me earlier, I'm concerned about parking on Church Street. It's already, I mean, that's a parking problem anywhere in Fairhope, but if any parking, well, in other words, if you're going to build, and I understand this project's going to take 2 years, number one, I don't think they have enough room, even what they're telling you. Where, no parking on Church Street, that's number one. Where are you gonna have your lay-down yard when you start your project? Where are you gonna put, where's that coming from? Where are the trash cans going? These may be not significant, but that's gonna be a problem. Well, I have not seen anything in any of these plans showing where any of this is shown, anywhere. I'm trying to think what was the other one. But that's the main thing I'm concerned about, because if none of these trees, oak trees, are gonna come down, right? There's 7 of them. There's one at the corner of Magnolia and Church, right on the very corner. And then if you come across, there's 7 of them across that. Now, it's my understanding these trees are not gonna be bothered. So the root system, I heard somebody talk about that earlier, that's gonna be somebody else's problem. But when you start building, I'm seeing, look at things where they're coming out with little walkways on Church Street. Where's that coming? I don't see it. I'm sorry, I don't.
I don't understand that question. I'm going to ask the engineer, but there are steps coming down to the sidewalk.
Yeah, what sidewalk?
Well, that's what Hunter was talking about,
that's
that
what I'm talking about.
it's
Where
going to
you
be
gonna put
8
one?
feet. It's going to be on Church Street, and that's what Hunter was saying, that if you look at the staff recommendations, one of the items, and I'll ask the engineer to discuss further, but they were discussing letting the sidewalk, rather than have it be required to be 8 feet the whole time,
Yeah.
to allow the developer to work with staff and kind of bring the necks
Well,
down on those
what I'm-
sidewalks when they
what
get
I'm
near the
getting to,
oak
Lee,
trees.
is if you're gonna put a sidewalk through there, you're gonna have to come on to Fairhope property line to get that much.
Sidewalks are generally in the right of way,
Yeah,
right,
It is absolutely in the right,
yeah.
and abutting the curb. If you
You think I'm supposed to see that?
Yeah.
That's why I didn't jump up and point. I understood you.
No.
But it will be on the inside of the curb, that's where the sidewalk is. The property line doesn't start on Church Street. How far is that away from the?
Well, let's wait till after
Oh,
the
exactly.
public hearing to stay on. All right. I'm going to get the engineer back up after the public hearing's closed, but I'm going to ask him about questions to elaborate on the sidewalk and tree protection. And then I don't think there's any parking on Church Street, but I'll ask him that question as well.
Yeah. Got enough problem now.
As far as the lay-down yard and the trash during construction, that's not one of the things that we deal with here.
I understand.
That
but
comes under the permitting.
Somebody needs to, so.
Right.
I will tell you, that if you look at their layout, their entry and egress from this project are faced on Magnolia. The project that was built just north of this, because of the layout, what they did was they built from the back out to the road. So they had, because you want to get those back units built first, because you've got to have the room to operate. But based on what they've got here, they don't show anything egressing or coming onto Church Street. Everything, their driveway, am I looking at that in the right? Yeah, yeah. So everything should, the way that this lays out, their construction entrance and their into and out of the site should be off of
Yeah, because
Magnolia.
the building you just mentioned, that's a problem right now with traffic. On the building that's being built at the corner of, across the street from Danny Calhoun's office.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You're talking, no, the one across from where
The
you
pilot
live.
building is the one he's talking about.
Oh, you're talking the pilot building? Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Pilot
it-
building, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, well, thank y'all.
Yes, sir, thank you. Anybody else wish to speak to this item?
My name is Brian Britt on behalf of 412 Fairhope LLC. We own the two lots immediately to the east of this project and contiguous to it. Our company's address is 455 Magnolia Avenue. And I am here actually to voice support for the project.
Do we allow that, Hunter?
I know, it's out of the ordinary. I thought I'd
You're
be
not
the
worried
ray
about the traffic, the
ray of
property
sunshine
values, and the
today.
water runoff?
As long as he's quick.
So I've met with the developer and the architect. I've seen the renderings. I think it's a very well thought out project, lower density than the prior versions we've seen. Great care with the green space, as Hunter pointed out. It's very tasteful. Not that that's a consideration that you have to worry about, but I do think it's going to be a nice addition to downtown. As far as the gentleman's concerns about laydown and dumpsters and things, in the scheme of downtown properties, this is a huge piece of property comparatively. And I've heard building downtown described as baking a cake and bringing the ingredients in a tablespoon at a time from the next room. But and I'm no stranger to that type of situation. But in this case, the size of the lot and the layout, I think they got plenty of room to work, and I don't think it's going to disturb the neighbors, myself included. So I just wanted to voice my support, and again, state that I think it's a real nice addition to downtown.
All right, thank you. All right, anybody else wish to speak to this item? All right, in that case, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. If you wouldn't mind just going over a little bit kind of the steps I'll plan on protecting the trees and, you know, with the sidewalk and the Church Street area, that is something that people are concerned with.
Yeah, so we have met with Gary Ikes about this, and he's proposed a whole plan for how we're going to protect the trees with fertilizing beforehand, and we're really planning to have a full kind of sit-down meeting with city right-of-way staff and the horticulturist and everybody to try and get the sidewalks just figured out as much as we can beforehand. And as Hunter mentioned, there's going to be some, as it's being constructed, we're going to have to work around roots and whatnot. As far as parking on Church Street, we're not proposing any parking along there. All the residences have garages with space for two parking.
Lee, if I may.
I think that was all, and one suggestion I'd make is, you know, I was wearing another hat with single tax. I was one of my projects was building that parking lot behind the library, and we used pavers where there was a magnolia tree, a really big magnolia tree over there in the southeastern corner. And we just added some sand and some pavers, and that might be a place for pavers, kind of like the bricks, like in downtown, but instead of just to stamp the concrete, pavers might, work nicely there and allow some, water to get in there and not put so much pressure on those roots.
Yeah, we're definitely open to alternative methods of construction, whatever will be easiest on the roots and the trees themselves.
Hunter, you had.
Yeah, just real quick, I do want to kind of give you, and I don't want to give the completely wrong impression on anything. We did meet with the applicant and our horticulture department. They asked about going ahead and starting treatment on some fertilizers that kind of prepare the roots, to give them the best shot. Might be 6 months down the road before they actually begin construction. So some of that was done. And working with our horticulturists, there was a tree furthest to the north that's kind of a forked. Some of that might come out. And then there was a tree, I think they're making every effort to save it. But during the construction on Church Street, one of the contractors lopped a limb off, and you can go see it right now. It's kind of broken. The tree's lopsided. They have every intent to preserve that, but I don't want to just, if a tree ever does come down, it's going to be under the supervision of the city. It is a right-of-way tree, and they're all working together to try to save what's there.
And I would like to say the staff has commented on how y'all have worked with them great, and from an early, I don't know if it's y'all or, David or whom, but that y'all asked for their input from an early stage and said that y'all have been, great to work with, and it's nice when people kind of come in and collaborate like that to start with. It makes a lot better product.
Thank you, and we appreciate their help, and especially in these more complicated situations.
Any more questions while the engineer's here?
Mr. Chairman, I want to say, the gentleman, looks like he left already. He'd mentioned trash, and I don't know if he was talking about the dumpster.
He was talking
for
about, I think, during the
construction or
construction.
hearing,
So
but I
handle that
wondered,
in the site plan.
Yeah, that'll be,
but I also want to point out the trash is collected by a private entity
Yeah.
inside the development.
he was just
for
talking about the
trash cans.
development, not in that.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Commissioners. Any more questions for staff or the engineer? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move we approve SD 23.26, added mixed-use MOP, subject to staff recommendations.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right, the next item on the agenda is ZC 23.06.
SR.
I'm sorry.
Item D. D. SR 23.
Excuse me, I skipped one, yes. SR 2305, the site plan review, this request of SC Civil, same project. But this is the site plan review as opposed to the MOP.
Yes, sir. And just as a reminder to the commission and the public, this is a site plan review that will move forward to the city council for review. There's not a public hearing, but the planning commission, just like staff in this one's expecting to make a recommendation to the city council. This is the corresponding project. I'm going to move forward because there's a lot of repetitive words on these slides, but just to point out a few other slides, this is the corner property. I will say here, one of the things that I found really fascinating on this project, they actually map the limbs of these and kind of designed the buildings around the existing limbs on those trees. So that is not a photo, that is not a model of a tree coming from CAD. That is the actual trees. You can see I actually criticized, next time take the signal out. But, it is accurate. So I give props for that. But this does show the elevation from that corner, kind of catty corner, into the green space and the front of the buildings that will be fronting Church and Magnolia. This is the elevations as you're looking at it from Magnolia. So in this photo, you see those elevated stairs that I was talking about coming from the door. There is a change in elevation to work with that topography. From the door down to the sidewalks, those will be elevated above the root zones.
This is my,
That's
oh, you're
church,
church,
that's
that's
church.
church.
Sorry, yes. Trying to get through too quick. That is Church Street. The buildings do meet the height restriction. Just to reiterate, that is 40 feet as measured from each building pad, and that is 40 feet to the top of everything. We don't have extra additional heights, and I think mechanical equipment, air conditioner units, and all those have a place at the ground level and are screened as our ordinance requires. The building materials are primarily brick, stucco, metal roof, and overhangs. You see kind of that elevation of the site, how it drops, works with the land. B2 has a front setback in standard B2 of 20 feet. However, being located in the CBD, we actually have what is in essence a build-to line, build to the property line, unless a courtyard plaza or other public space is provided. That's what is provided to preserve the root zones and that green space that was provided on the corner. The landscape plan, we've reviewed, our staff has reviewed, there's, horticulture department has reviewed that. Parking, 14 spaces are provided for the 7 residential units. Again, as we discussed in MOP, not to be redundant, but the commercial does not need one. I'm not going to repeat the sidewalk conversation, but it's there again. Landscape plans for your review. Mechanical equipment has been finalized, reviewed, and accepted and appear on the site plan. HVAC equipment is screened. An example is on the right that shows where your trash receptacles will be. So we did consider that. Dumpster locations and screening units 3 through 7 are strictly residential and have those located in each garage. Units 1 and 2, which are mixed use, commercial on the bottom, residential above, have a residential trash receptacle in each garage and a screened commercial receptacle located to the rear of the units. I'm not going to stand right here and say whether that's going to be commercial or the city's going to pick those up and leave flexibility there. All we really care about is they're screened and they're not coming out to the street for pickup, and we don't have a line of 14 trash cans. There is retaining wall there that's meeting, this is kind of in between the buildings, fronting Church Street is meeting the height requirements. Just to see, it kind of separates the courtyard in between the 2 buildings, or between the 3 buildings. And screening the air conditioning units from the street. Stormwater, like the MOP, is approved. Signage on the commercial will meet our sign ordinance. There is no sign plan supplemented with this one. ADA requirements will be met. Traffic did not generate a study. The traffic volumes did not generate a study. Again, this is the site plan, same as we saw with the MOP. Staff does make a recommendation of approval for this project, condition with 3 items. No part of any building shall extend beyond 40 feet from the natural elevation of each building pad. Signage plans shall conform to the sign ordinance. And same condition, provide a hold harmless agreement for stairs proposed in the right-of-way. With that, staff is through, and we'll turn that over to the commission for any questions you may have. Same applicant, same representative.
I've just got one question for you out of curiosity, nothing to do with the project.
Sure.
But why did y'all put recommendation number 1 in? Isn't that just the code?
Just because we're looking at each building plan, the code says natural elevation of the lot. So remember the conversation we had at Van Antwerp?
Yes.
Where ultimately they could do a 13-foot building?
No.
We looked here and said it really makes more sense to look at each central building site on this one.
Yep.
And it works with the land. So this condition just memorializes that we're not necessarily creating a precedent for anything else, but how to clearly measure it.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions for staff at this time?
The only question I had, if you back up a few, it had said you had something in there that said mechanical locations had been, okay, equipment has been finalized, reviewed, and accepted. So, and I understand we're talking about the HVAC. I'm seeing it all the time about generator locations. I'm battling that in Battles Trace right now because of the tight setbacks. So I just want to make sure they understand that that is exclusive to the air conditioning units because that has separate requirements than a generator.
So, great point, Eric. We looked at this a little bit more than just the HVAC. If you remember the previous project we looked at on this site, they didn't leave room for back of the house items. We wound up with a bank of 10 gas meters out on the corner right where our landscape's supposed to be, and water meters and electric transformers. There may be an electric transformer in the right of way, but everything else will be located. We did not review any generators, and there does have some specific guidelines there. So I would highly recommend, we won't make it a condition because
No,
they
that's
can
fine.
handle it at building permit.
And I'd be happy to talk to the applicant because, the other thing I want to make sure they're aware, this is in the fire district. So the residences will be sprinklered.
Yep. And but generators are, I would think would be warranted, and there's some separation that I know that Eric's talking about, and we struggle with sometimes when people don't think about it on the front end. So I would highly recommend get with the building department to
Be happy to
think
talk
about where
them
to site
all.
those.
Let's plan it out.
Okay.
Do y'all have generators in this plan?
Our plan here is not to permit generators, but to have, people have the opportunity to do an alternative battery, backup power supply. Generac now offers that, Tesla offers that. It's wall mounted
Yeah.
in the interior of the garage.
Okay.
And it's silent, it doesn't produce noise, fumes and all that. And now, if it lasts indefinitely like the generator does, no, but depending on how many of the batteries you put in your garage, service your home or business, whatever, for, multiple days. So our plan is not permit
Generator.
because of all those things, the setbacks, the noise when they come on every week or every 14 days.
Yeah.
And then, of course, generators could be a blessing, but they have a lot of issues with them.
Well, they're just highly desired right
Well,
now.
well, when you look at the central business
Mr.
district,
Chairman.
I mean, where I live, I'd love to have one. But in the central business district, downtown was out of power for 3 days because Alabama Power was down. But in Hurricane Ivan, 12 hours, Hurricane Frederick, 6 hours. So, when you look back over 40 years and you've got 3 days that a generator would have been utilized, it kind of questions, is it worth, all that noise and hassle and $12,000 installation, all the space it takes up and whatnot in that particular location. And then it would be my luck that the one time it'd be needed for that 3 days and Oakland would have gotten through the gas line and it wouldn't work anyway.
Well,
So-
the Tesla wall is a great idea.
That
and
is.
I'm just curious, I don't know if you're going to want to incorporate solar into that, because that's the one we have now. That I recall we permitted was a Tesla wall that incorporated solar with it. But however you want to do it, I think that's a great alternative, though.
All right. You done, Hunter?
I'm done.
All right, this is not a public hearing, and I don't guess anybody else wants to speak. Mr. Johnson left already. Commissioners, do you have any questions? The applicant's engineer is still here. If you have any other questions, I will again reiterate that this motion will be a motion to make a recommendation to City Council rather than a motion for approval. So remember that, but if there are no questions.
Mr. Chairman, I will probably vote in favor of this. To make the recommendation that we approve it, me being one of those, only if you come to the council meeting and repeat what you said about how much electricity has been out over the last 40 years, because we got people in this city that want to spend tens of millions of dollars putting power underground for those 4 hours that it's going to be out. So
Yeah.
I'll support it if you do that.
Okay, great, thank you. This isn't my project, David, to say that. All right, do I have a recommendation?
I have a recommendation of, to approve SR 2305 with staff's recommendation.
It's a recommendation for city council.
Oh,
To recommend approval to city council.
Oh, yes, recommend, go to the trash, sorry. I approve that we do SR 2305 to approval to the city council.
We have a motion to approve,
Subject to staff recommendation.
recommend approval to city council subject to staff recommendations?
Yes, I said that.
Subject to staff recommendations. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Last item on the agenda is ZC 2306, 404 Oak LLC.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
So this
And
is
again, I will say one more time, redundantly, this is also a zoning item. So we will simply make a recommendation to city council because zoning is done by ordinance and only the city council has the authority to do an ordinance.
This is, however, a public hearing, unlike the site plan review.
Correct.
So, all right, this is an application for a zoning change. No site plan approval, there's a straight zoning change from B4 to B2 at 404 Oak Avenue. This is in the Central Business District. This has an existing building on the property. I think most are familiar. This is right in the middle of the block on Oak. Sirkowski Architecture was the building prior. New ownership. The current request is seeking to put a restaurant in that location. B4 does not allow a restaurant. So we looked at kind of the options available for what would allow that. B2 does. And let me go back to the zoning map real quick. It's this property that faintly you can see another property line there. So there is another B4 property. We've actually recommended on some, and I think the Planning Commission and City Council has discussed in many years past, of keeping some B4 on the periphery of the CBD where it adjoins residential, single-family residential neighborhoods. However, this is not that situation. We don't see that problem. There is an easement on the adjacent property to provide access. We'll look at the building details. We're not approving a building in this zoning case, just the zoning that would allow different uses. Just want to provide that because we do have an existing structure. So that 20-foot easement is accessed from the Bancroft side through the adjacent property line. Whatever is generated on that, the current request is for restaurant. Anything we do on a zoning change, all the other options are also available, whether that's next month or 20 years down the road. Those uses will be either by right or conditional uses that go to this time Board of Adjustment for approval. Restaurant usage is by right in B2. So that would be allowed with this. It does meet the comprehensive plan. You may recall on this property, we approved an MOP in the past. It was for 3 residential units and 1 office unit. We didn't really look at too much on any changes or rezoning, but there's just a pivot for potentially looking at a restaurant. So here for reference, if we need to, is the use table.
And if I could interrupt you, Commissioners, look at the use table and forget about this being proposed to be a restaurant. You know, they might get out there and decide there's not enough utilities, gas, this, that, or the other, talk to Eric and have some issue and change their mind on the restaurant, and they've still got the B2 zoning. And so, you know, and I don't have a problem with the B2 zoning. I wish we could do this piece and the piece next door. We actually recommended to have that zoned B4 back about 11 years ago. At one time, we tried to get everything in the Central Business District zoned B2 because the worst thing in the Central Business District is B4. And we recommended that be B2 and across the street be either B2 or B3B. You know, you put an office there, an accountant's office, and you've got 7 parking spaces on the street from 8 a.m. to 5, and they don't spend any money in town. They're not going to restaurants. They're not moving their cars back or forth or doing anything. And so, you know, that's, you know, is we move forward, if we want to protect Fairhope, we have to be very, very, very careful to do everything we can to edify, protect, and enhance the retail that we have in the central business district. Whenever we do these surveys of Fairhope, people say what makes Fairhope. Fairhope is, in fact, the downtown. And, you know, I'm an insurance agent, so I'll pick on insurance agents and attorneys' offices, but the more of those we have in downtown, you know, the less attractive, and I'm picking on Chris too, you know, the downtown is. The more retail businesses we have, the more, you know, women don't come downtown to shop at one shopping center. You know, they want to pop to a few different places. So I think, you know, it's not my turn to speak on it yet. I'm just saying, and prefacing, I think it's a great idea, but I always say on these zonings, 4 times out of 5, we change the zoning, and what they say was going to come does not come. And I'm not speaking about the pilots per se, but I'm just saying you have these ideas and you make the zoning, and then after that, sorry, Mike's getting hot, and I'll shut up. But after that, you know, when the rubber hits the road, sometimes what you want to do does not work out.
Right.
And I love I mean, restaurant fine, retail fine, no, I don't have an issue, but just making sure that commissioners understand that this is not a PUD. These are the, you know, these items right here, what could all go in there.
Yep. And I'll leave this available if we need to come back and look at any specific uses, because we trimmed some fat, and I'll get to that. So just real quick, B4 is the business and professional, B2 is general. We do recommend approval of this project, this rezoning request. However, in the central business district section of the zoning ordinance, it allows the city to condition those rezoning cases for in any way we see fit. So what we did is exactly that. We took a look at the B2 uses table in 3.1, and staff debated a lot of those uses and came up with a list on the screen. So we would like to recommend to prohibit the uses you see here for this particular property. That's certainly debatable. You can chime in, and then obviously the city council will get a chance as well, whether to remove some or leave some. I'm gonna bounce back for just a second, because we didn't remove some that may be problems on certain sites, not necessarily this one, but what we looked at is there another review procedure? So really by right uses is what we were concerned with. The ones that may be, you know, hotels allowed on this site, that may be okay at certain scale. It has a review procedure. It goes to Board of Adjustment. So those conditional uses, we didn't really strike through anything. Did have talked to the applicants, and I don't think there's any problem with this use from the owners. So if there's any debate, conversation, adding things to the list, removing some, we're certainly up for that conversation.
Why B2 instead of B3B?
B3B's kind of on the other side of the street. B2 is right next door. It's a natural evolution of the zoning. All of this pale pink is B2.
Can we do a recommendation for the lot next door at the same time?
It's not the same owner. I mean, no, not for this application. This application is particular owner for a
It
particular.
had to be advertised, never mind, I'm sorry, I knew that, that was a stupid question.
Yeah.
I need some air conditioning, Mike. All right. Any other questions for Hunter at this time?
It looks like the uses you put on as restricted pretty much just follow the conditional uses on the table. There might be 1 or 2 that's not on there, but it's
Yeah.
essentially all of the conditional uses.
I mean, some of these are debatable. I mean, a storage unit is probably not the right location. A
Right.
true convenience store.
No, I mean, who's gonna, that's too valuable property for automobile repair, but.
Right.
I mean,
A
put it
kennel
down.
is not the right location. I mean, I
Right.
don't, a clinic's more office, you know, where we're taking it away out of the office pool.
Right,
So,
all right. Well, if you're done, Hunter, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Anybody from the public wish to speak to this item? Hey, how are you?
I'm Chelsea Hughes. I live at 709 Fairhope Avenue, and I have a business on Church Street. And I've never done this before. This is my first meeting, so I'm learning what's normal and what's not. In this case, would we be able to add types of businesses to this list? like businesses that require lots of parking for long periods of time?
Possibly, I don't, what is your concern?
And/or, kind of playing off what you said earlier, like, can we say that new businesses that are being added to a B2 or B3, no more banks, no more lawyers, no more things that don't bring shoppers to downtown, like looking for businesses that have like lots of foot traffic and turnover times are quicker?
I think I would love that idea, but I don't know if we could do it just on, Chris would be comfortable with us doing it on just one property like that. I'd love to see us kind of review the central business district and discuss what we allow on the ground floor. You don't want to be too restrictive with people's, personal property rights. And in Alabama, people are pretty serious about, those and gun rights as well. But on the other hand, offices, you don't want to get too many offices in the downtown area. I totally understand.
I'm just thinking we already have a lot of employees and owners parking downtown. You add more businesses, there's going to be more of that on-street parking. And then just as a business that benefits from a lot of walk-in traffic, I just would like to see that on other streets as well. I do think if we put a restaurant there, that's great. There are some other new restaurants like Nini Squares that people would have to walk past to get down to this. So I think it can be beneficial if it,
This area is kind of becoming restaurant alley, isn't it?
hey, as long as they spend dollars. Okay, that was my only question.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak to this item? All right, in that case, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time. And if there are no more questions from commissioners, for staff, or anyone else, I will accept a motion for a recommendation to city council.
I move that we recommend this approval of the ZC 23.06 to the city council, subject to staff recommendation, subject to the allowed uses prohibitions.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion?
Yes, I thought it was a good question of why not B3B, to be honest with you. It's just not as, it's closer to B4. Sorry, I cannot talk at all today, it's very frustrating. It's a lot closer to B4, but it allows the restaurants, so I thought it was a very valid question.
I think it's a valid question. I mean, my personal view is across the street should be B3B, that we have as B4 there, and that inside that, everything else inside that square is B2. And to have just those two items B2, just seems kind of out of place to me.
Well, and I thought everything downtown had an underlying B2. That's what, I'm also confused about that.
We tried 11 years ago, we had some folks tell us that should be B2, and we changed a few items around, and for somehow or another, those two were missed. Even though, because there was some commercial over further on Equity where kind of that kudzu 90-degree turn is, and we cleaned a lot of stuff up, and for some reason, those two fell out of the recommendation, and I don't know how.
I do want to make, just really doesn't have any place in this discussion necessarily, but I find it hard to believe that bed and breakfast is not allowed in B2. You can have a restaurant, you can have a hotel on a pill, but you can't have bed and breakfast. And that brings foot traffic to downtown, which is what the lady's talking about.
Can you have it subject to approval?
It's not even, nope.
It's not, and
not
that's,
even us,
Well, that's a change we need to make.
yeah.
and it's, in B2 typically, and this is the problem with just land use zoning. I'm leading up to a little bit of comp plan conversation that's coming in the future. But part of the problem when you just base it on land use, typically you don't want a bed and breakfast right beside the Chevron. No offense to Chevron, by the convenience store. So it's hard to kind of pin down, but I agree. I mean, there's no.
You don't want one, but if somebody was unwise enough to do that, they can make that mistake. You typically don't want the station next to a bed and breakfast, not the other way around.
Right. Well, people staying at the bed and breakfast complain about the noise and traffic of the gas stations, what they're trying to avoid.
We'll just let a capitalistic society take care of that situation on its own.
Well, you make it a conditional use, and it's easy. You can look at each site. B3B, there is no B3B around. So that's kind of spot zoning, you know,
I
B3A
buy
is
that
what,
argument.
but
I was looking
B3A
at- yeah, it
is
got
what's
my
next door.
attention because of the particular uses on that. that was
And
allowed.
I believe restaurant was not allowed or by right, no, it required another step to go to Board of Adjustment. It's kind of one of the critical thought processes we had, just at this current application. I mean, when we see the application was for B2, so we kind of looked at that. Restaurant here, is that really a problem? Do we want to send somebody to Board of Adjustment? But it's the castle is the only kind of B3B or B3A property around. So,
But I think that B2 over there where people have some residences would probably work as B3B. I mean, if somebody wanted to rent those places on short term to be nice and convenient and, you know, would sure edify the downtown.
and do you know
Of course-
why
Of course,
B3
Hunter and I disagree because I think, you know, VRBO ought to be allowed all over the fruits and nuts and
Well,
we
allowed
just
short-term rentals
disagree.
in B4. Didn't we allow, just about 6 months ago, allow short-term rentals in B4?
just in the CBD?
Just in the city.
Just in the CBD.
Yeah.
Now, you know, Lee, do you know, the difference in B3A, why B3A was chosen for the one property that is there
I do not.
over B3B?
I don't know the difference between the two.
Right.
Without pulling the ordinance out, to be honest.
Yeah.
All right. Any further discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion we just
You
read.
We have a
Oh, a
motion.
motion, and we had a second too?
Yes.
All right, if no more further, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes unanimously. This is our public forum, so, anybody who would like to come and say anything for the record, come up, and of course, just state your name and your address.
Good evening. Gary Gover, 300 Lincoln Street in Fairhope. Just recently, the performance period for the grant covering the preparation of our land use plan was extended a year into 2025. And I'm wondering if we have any kind of a preview of the kinds of differences that are anticipated compared to the draft that was developed earlier this year. So we can start preparing ourselves for the kinds of things we can expect from it.
Thank you, Gary. I do not know the answer to that. Do you?
We do not today. That is being worked on, and our game plan will be presented at a city council work session. So, and we'll make sure planning commission knows, public knows. We have some tentative dates scheduled for that. But our overall goal at staff level is by February of 2024, we have a comp plan adopted and start moving into the phase of the grant that allows us to start amending regulations for that, is the game plan. So we'll be keeping ear out. We will be in front of hopefully council work session to present that. We've already had steering committee meetings and public meetings galore and presented a draft. We're working on revisions and feedback we got off that draft. And we'll present that at a work session, not for adoption. That will be a kind of, hopefully a collective, hope every plan commissioner can make that one, and we can kind of have one meeting to present those ideas and what we've come up with.
Comp plans can be passed by the P and Z or by the city council. I kind of prefer them being passed by the city council, because that way you know that they're on board versus having one plan. Isn't that correct, Chris?
No. Generally, yes. I mean, council will make recommendations, but the master plan or the comprehensive plan generally is something by state statute that is adopted by the
Well,
planning
Because I
commission.
know the last ones, we were the ones who voted, but I haven't
That's
seen a
right.
thing, and I know nothing of what's going on with
That's
this
right.
now.
And
but-
you obviously get the input from council and their, as
Right.
well as the public.
Well, the last one we did, we did a roll call vote for the council as well, just to make sure that they agreed with it, because, so many items that come like zoning have to go to council anyway, so if they don't buy into the comprehensive plan, what's it matter?
Absolutely.
But I
It's definitely-
thought this one was going the council
Well, it's
way.
definitely tied to citizen input, and, you know, obviously you want councils to weigh in, and there's nothing wrong with council approving it as well. Just by law, planning commission is the final decision maker for the approval process
That's-
there.
I did not
And
know
there
that.
are some, as we kind of talked about, land use has limitations. And we've used already used some tools, overlay districts, things like that, build two lines in the CBD. So we kind of have some decision trees to make in this comp plan. And I think if council's not on board with that, the follow-up amendments are going to be useless. So I think that is a time to have a presentation and room for feedback before we ever present a final to be adopted.
I agree. All right. Anybody else have anything to bring up in public forum at this time? Yes, sir, Gary.
When I think about the subdivision developments that have occurred along 181 north of 104 over the last couple of years, the provisions for alternative transportation, like pedestrian and bicycle facilities, have been treated in different ways, if my thinking is correct. Sometimes the burden was picked up by the developer. In some cases, the burden will be picked up by the Metropolitan Planning Organization with government funding, so on and so forth. So there's either a complicated process for figuring out how to provide these things as we develop, or there are just different ways to do it.
I can answer that. Normally, we require the developer to do the sidewalks and the roads and the infrastructure. In the area that you're talking about, I don't know specifically the exceptions, but I know that there were some. But when it's left up and open, that's typically due to AlDOT and the widening of 181 and not wanting to require improvements to be installed prematurely when the road is going to widen and take out the improvements.
And to add on there, I don't know of any MPO-funded project. Every project along that route, at least from 104 north, is providing their own sidewalks. The one inconsistency that we are working on a standard, and unfortunately, the last one was probably the best solution. We ask every development, even though it's not in the subdivision regulations, and while some were zoned, some were not, we ask every one of those projects to provide, and engineers and design team, to provide us a mixed-use trail. We got 3 different designs, or 4. The last one was phenomenal. I mean, it used standards around the country, and that was the Encounter development, if you remember, on the northeast corner. So that is something in this comp plan we are looking at, to have a standard. But unlike sidewalks, you don't want to say you have to provide a 12-foot mixed-use trail on every street. So what we've got to come up with is a transportation plan. Where are those bike routes warranted? Slow-speed vehicles too. So that's one of the things that we're looking at in the transportation section of the comp plan that can guide which roads. And then we can add to the subdivision regulations. If you're doing something abutting this particular street, then you have to provide that, and here's exactly the standards, so when they're built and connected in the future, they'll all kind of coordinate.
So the standard would apply whether we're dealing with a state road or a county road or a municipal.
In theory and in
street.
principle, it would be, but when you get out to county roads and state roads.
They're sitting on
You just-
private property, Lee. I mean, this is kind of a
Yeah, those would be on private property, but I'm saying, and we get to right-of-way sidewalks and some of the connectivity, you know, we don't have any power over AlDOT.
And I think they're.
Like when people ask us, can you put a traffic signal here, in an area where we may think one needs to be? If it's an AlDOT road, we don't, you know, we can request to them that they do it, but we don't have that that authority. do
Mr.
we
Gover
not?
brings up one good point, that we can dictate the subdivisions and certainly make those mixed-use trail sidewalks, whatever happen on private property. And that's what's happening in a linear basis as you go north and south on 181. But eventually, they all come to that intersection and have to cross those intersections to really be interconnected. And that's where we have been working through the MPO of trying to signalize, pedestrian signalizations, like 104 and 181 exactly. That is their project, that's their road, their right-of-ways. There's always a little tension of, do they want pedestrians in those roads? The traffic engineers maybe not, but the safety folks at Aldott do.
I
'cause
remember
they
the
realize
engineer
you don't wanna-
discussing golf carts and the way that he wanted to be able to incorporate that from those neighborhoods.
Yeah. And those developments provided that, but it is kind of when you get to those intersections, just like Greeno today. I mean, we did projects for my time at Greeno and Fairhope Avenue to provide. Jack, were you on council when those were done with the paving and the crosswalks?
Where at again?
Greeno.
Fairhope and Greeno's one. You know, the paving, and I think Morphe has on one
No.
side. You know, so there is the opportunity, but it's right. I mean, and I think everybody can see 181, the expansion and the growth of that 181. I mean, they're out of money in that phase. When we talked about it, they don't disagree with the crosswalks. It's just the purse strings at the federal level haven't filtered down to supply
It's
that
such a
money.
big project. You know, Gulf Shores and Orange Beach did such a nice job down there. When you look at what they did, where everything's right turn out, they have places for U-turns, and when you cross the street, you get onto a raised kind of concrete bunker where you feel comfortable. You're not crossing.
It's approved a lot of hotels, so we can get that $20 million in lodging tax
Yeah,
to pay for.
you're not, crossing 5 lanes at one time, which is really,
It was a
really
good,
nice.
good solution.
If we had bed and breakfast in B2, we probably could afford that.
That's right. Everybody avoids our impact fees anyway. They're building right outside the city limits, so.
Right.
But, yeah, that is certainly valid comments that we've been working on and will be a part of the comp plan. And hopefully we have there's a, I don't, Jack, in the MPO, I don't know if you've seen it, Mr. Gover's on the MPO pedestrian.
I'm only the chairman, I probably hadn't seen it.
Right. There is a proposed Baldwin County wide, you've seen the highway proposal network. There is a bike and pedestrian connectivity plan that's also being proposed. Unfortunately, one of our biggest critiques is, hey, you don't have any pedestrian connectivity around 181 and 104. Keep that traffic moving was their thought, and that doesn't quite line with other opinions.
Anything else, Gary?
I'm not sure if this is in the right venue for this one, but I've become aware of the thinking that the provision of utility services to large lot properties tends to put the burden of expense for the delivery and the maintenance of the infrastructure for those things onto the owners of smaller lot properties. In other words, if you had a cluster of, a dense cluster of small properties and you deliver all the infrastructure and maintain it to provide for electricity, sewer, water, and all that, the cost per resident to do that is small compared to the cost for a cluster of 5 or 10 acre pieces of land with one residence on each. So what happens is you get a kind of inequitable cost for utility services for small lots bearing a greater burden in their monthly bills than those people on large lots. So it would suggest that the most equitable thing to do is somehow figure out a fee schedule that takes into consideration the size of lots or the cost of maintaining infrastructure to those lots. And I don't know if that's an idea that's ever been thought out or considered.
I don't know if that's our place, as far as the cost of the utilities and, one thing that we see is it seems like 9 out of 10 developments that we see, people are trying to see how small they can cut the pieces of pie. And, we like to encourage larger lots when we can because it's nice to have a mix. And you've sat in our meetings and think, I can think of 1, 2, in the past year, I can think of 2 large lot subdivisions. Past 18 months, one that Trey Cordy did, and one out on Red Barn Road that was kind of recently looked at. But almost everything it seems like we see, tell me if I'm wrong, Mike.
Most of the utilities are scaled. Water meters are put in based on the size.
Right.
They're on the front end, costs are scaled, and then uses are metered based on usage, not size of a lot. You can have one 900 square foot house on a big lot. Why should they pay more than somebody with a 4,400 square foot house on a quarter-acre lot? It's about the uses they put into those utilities.
When you're talking about the infrastructure kind of stretching out when you have a lower density versus, throwing it up in one condo.
Now, when it's, I agree, like looking at when it's put in, and right now, it's who's the first to the table. If you're putting something that requires infrastructure a mile away from where it's currently existing, that first applicant's paying the bill, footing the bill.
And there's also some wisdom, though. I can tell you an example of where I live, which is a very, by today's standards in Fairhope, an older, very old subdivision now. We had one neighbor many years ago that wanted sewer service, and Mayor Kent was the then mayor, and we talked about it, and the thought was, if you build it, they'll come, because as people's septic tanks go out, they'll have to hook up to the sewer. So it may have been a lot of small lot owners, paying for that infrastructure. It ran all the way down to the bottom of the hill and then ran out to this guy's house. But since that time, we've probably had 6 or 7 customers, come in after the fact and hook up to it. So there's some strategies, building on your business as well.
Well, I remember the only one exception I remember, the only exception I can remember, you made Jack, but Mike Ford, when he was a councilman, got the city to run a sewer line down 98 all the way to Barnwell, and anybody could hook up to it, but you had to pay X dollars, and if you came after it, if you were grandfathered in, if you had septic tank before, but if you came after, you had to pay, X dollars per linear foot that you had. I remember that because a little subdivision that I did, Boardwalk of Bailey's Creek, I argued that, we had 90 feet of linear foot along the, scenic Highway 98, and the city came back and said, well, we had 8 lots, 100 feet a lot, so they said we had 800 feet. And we had an argument, and I lost. But we had to pay, X dollars per foot for every foot to hook up to the sewer, but it was nice because, we could not have done that, with 16 lots. We couldn't have afforded the cost of running a sewer line 3 miles down 98 to attach to those.
For the record, I'm on septic tank. I didn't benefit from that sewer, if anybody's wondering. It's been years, and I'm on septic.
You're the one with the brown stream running down the hill. All right, anything else?
That's it,
All
thanks.
right, anybody else have anything to say? All right.
In reference to the SEC Magnolia Church, when I'm thinking about parking, and please, if this is not the place, just tell me where it is or the time.
Sure.
I think that we could benefit downtown greatly from a parking area. It doesn't have to be a parking lot, but a piece of property that owners and employees could park on. My business alone is 6 people. We're on Church. Now, our business has dedicated parking at the end of our building, But as a business owner, I'd rather that be available to my patrons. And even though they're putting 2 spots per residence, they'll have guests, and then the businesses will have owners, and the businesses will have employees. So it is going to congest Magnolia and Church. And while I'm glad that it's getting busier than it was 2 years ago, I just know that we continue to compound on an already existing issue. And I've talked to a few business owners, and there's, Oh, great.
There is a parking subcommittee of this commission. We haven't met yet, but the plan is to address those problems.
And one thing I like to suggest is to go to the current parking authority and ask them to quit taking parking spaces away for loading and unloading. I don't know how many parking spaces we've lost for loading and unloading. I mean, let people just be slow and squeeze by and be a little inconvenienced. But it's like every time one person whines about a truck being parked here, a truck being parked there, let's take 3 more parking spaces here and 5 more there and 3 more here. And, we need to make roads in the central business district one way. We need to do angle parking so we can get more parking and quit doing all the loading, unloading zones and help the folks out. That's my theory. But like on the zoning that you just saw, our choice was B2 central, which is business, or B4. If you look at a parking difference in that, it's hard for us to say, well, let's not change it from B2 to B4 due to the fact of parking impacts. Because say you put a dentist office there, which was next door for years, we'll say, somebody wanted to put a dentist office there in B4, which would be their right. You might have one dentist with 4 employees taking 5 parking spaces. And if he's the type that books a lot of people and people are he might have 4 people in chairs, 4 people in the, and have 12 parking spaces, taken up all day long. So, which would be a lot more than, a retail spot with somebody just walking through. So as far as the parking went on that decision, it was really kind of a no thought.
I'm in total favor of
But with
Magnolia
that
Church.
said, your point is good, and with parking, there's no perfect answer,
As a business owner, it would be nice if I
May
could
I
tell my
ask-
employees they're
complain
not
about
allowed
loading
to.
zones.
Jack's first.
Jack loves loading zones. People say we need parking garages, but then the employees don't park in the parking garages even when we have them.
That's what I'm kind of curious of your employees, and not to pick on you, but.
Pick
you're
on
here.
me. It's fine.
You're here. How many of your employees park in one of the public parking spaces right now?
So I have 2 that they could technically fit, but their vehicles are large enough that you wouldn't want them parking in there because they'd be taking out other people's stuff. So they park at the end of the building, I park further down the road.
So the challenge of a parking lot that employees can park in, where do you put it? That's centrally located. We kind of have a parking deck that's open to the public.
We have
A lot behind Panini Pete's. We have the library. We have on-street parking
I
everywhere.
have to say it every time that this comes up, and I know that there are people that aren't physically able to walk that far, but I'd have to believe that most people are. And we have a parking deck that remains half empty every single day. And I don't know where your business is on Church. Is it right there between?
It's directly
Fairhope?
across the street. And
Well,
so
then, as you know, it's a 30-second walk?
I love the parking garage personally.
Yeah.
There are times around 12 to 2, though, that it is completely full unless it's Hampton parking. Are we allowed to park in the Hampton
I'm there
parking?
about 3 days a week, and I hardly ever see the roof of the top of that parking deck full unless there's a Arts and Crafts Festival or a parade or lighting of the trees. That's the only time I see it. I'm not going to encourage you to park in a Hampton Inn spot, but their guests are usually gone during the day, and they're in the evening when downtown's closed, and it's not heavily patrolled. But I see a lot of non-Hampton spots there, especially on the upper level. I park there literally 2 or 3 days a week. Now, and I only say that to get the word out that we have an underutilized parking garage.
I also want to make it clear that I'm not complaining that there's not enough parking. I'm I'm venturing to say that if we had a specific place for business owners and staff that was almost required for them to be,
We would love to require.
then we
them to
could
park the
open
parking
up
deck.
50 spots on 2
We,
blocks.
we encourage every owner to tell their employees to
Yeah,
park
we
at the deck.
we love that.
I think it's the way employees change so much, especially when you look at employees for a restaurant or something, the turnover's so fast. It is, I think I mean, and I would invite you, if you can give us your name, we'd love to have some input, when we meet, because that's I think that's a great
Well, and here's the other thing.
I would love that.
A lot of cities go to the extreme, something Fairhope does not want to do. Let me put that up on the record. We do not want to do this. But there are people that said, if you put in 2-hour parking or 4-hour parking, it will eliminate the people that are working from 8 to 5.
As a
9 to
business
5
owner, I'm fine with
all
that.
day. But, you know, our parking meters, but we have enough spaces that we don't need that.
But the problem is that certain
We don't
people,
want to run off our shoppers.
you know, won't let us give tickets to like 5A and local cars and not to the.
I would also be in
Well, my
favor of
husband got
that.
a ticket in the 25. He was in there for 27 minutes, but he said it was cheaper to pay that ticket than, he said, I'll go
No,
do
but
it.
I'm saying if we could, you know, just
26 minutes.
just give the tickets to the locals and not the out-of-towners. But it's a difficult thing because, you know, you sit there and you see people park at Walmart, and how far of a walk is it if you park at Walmart and walk back and get some yogurt? You know, that's basically like parking at, you know, Fairhope Avenue and Section Street and walking to the pier and back, other than the hill, distance-wise. It's an amazing distance, and nobody complains about it at Walmart, where in Fairhope, people drive the block 4 times
To
to
sit
pull
right
it right
in front of the door.
business. And if you could keep the employees out of there, the employees there 8 hours, and if you just have the customers come in, they're there for a lot less time than that. And
Is there a parking area on, like going towards the bay from Church Street? Everything in my mind is from Church Street. That maybe is owned, I think it's owned by the city, that is leased to one of the schools.
Yeah, that's St. James parking lot.
That area, is that
A lot
owned
of
by the
times
city?
film industry will use that for things, but that used to be tennis courts at one time for this.
I was just thinking,
you know, that property's being looked at as redevelopment right now with,
Okay.
with different plans.
if each business had a designated several spots, like I'd be happy if I hire someone, whether they're transient or not. It's like, this is your parking sticker. These are our 8 spots for our business in this area that helps you make money working for me. You need to go park there, and this needs to be in your window. Then the spots have a designation. This is for Unit B at 19 North Church Street. And each one, based on its size, has a space enough for each person. If you're running behind in your day, you can plan for, I have to walk 4 blocks. But as an employee who may not have as much vested interest as I do, that doesn't plan their morning well, has to run around looking to see where they might park for the day, and then they end up parking right in front of the business
You know-
because they're late.
I didn't think, and you can also park in the parking deck, and we have a shuttle that will drive you to your business for free.
Well, and you've also got, you know, you go to Savannah, and when you walk by a business, if the employees are sitting on a 5-gallon bucket out back taking their smoke break, and the bus goes by, the tourist bus or whatever, everybody waves. Every single employee waves.
Where?
In Savannah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If they're out there working the seat, they wave. If they're a valet parker and a bus with tourists goes by, everybody smiles and waves. And they all park in their areas, but they've got a very, very close, cohesive Chamber of Commerce, and that's their big thing. They just push it with all employees, and they'll boycott each other. If somebody's employees park in front of businesses, they'll give them a few warnings, and then they'll start getting everybody locally to boycott their business.
A little self-regulation.
You know, they just say, hey, you know, we'll tell everybody that your restaurant has rats in it. And it really works. None of the employees park there. I'm joking about that. But they do put very, very much positive pressure and very, very much negative pressure, and they all get along. But, you know, we have the Merchants Committee and the Chamber, and the Chamber's for the entire, you know, county, but maybe the Merchants Committee could work on, you know, strong-arming people along those
Well,
lines.
thank you. I just want to know where the right place was to take that There are several business owners that bring this to me on a regular basis, and I'm tired of hearing it and
I
not
think there's a lot
figuring
of
out.
stuff being looked at, and I think, one-way roads and angle parking and different things like that are all in play, and Jack has his PhD on that, and gets taught to him about probably 5 times a week.
All right.
It's like the people that take their grocery cart back inside, it only can start with you, and you start with yourself, and maybe set a
Big fan.
precedent. If you can do little things, you can do big things.
That's right. Awesome. Thank you all very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.